Hello and welcome to Get Good. This is a new model for YouTube and will be a series of videos of me painting different elements on this librarian. The first one here will be the armor parts in blue, and then later on I will do some metallics and purity seals and the power axe and stuff like that, even the face. So this will be a series to follow. It will be a fairly high standard, but not at all close to competition standard. And there is a real reason. I'll get into a bit later. On this model, it is also a bit of a different approach for me. As you can see, it is entirely blue right now, and I normally don't do it that way. But I'll get into it, but I just want to talk quickly through the colors I'm using. Because on the wet palette there is a bunch of different colors, and I'm really only using the blues because of only painting blue armor. But I am using two of the others. So for the two blues, I have picked out Reaper color Oceanic Blue, which is the darker one, and then Reaper colors Glacier Blue, which is the brighter one. I don't think it matters at all what kind of blue you're using. So if you have a pattern for your army or whatever, just use that one, those ones. But I just chose some nice blues that I already had. I will be painting his armor quite bright. So it won't be fully non-metallic, but it will be pretty bright. I'll talk through how to make the reflections on his armor also a bit later. So the two colors I'm using more than Oceanic Blue and Glacier Blue are on the wet palette. The very dark brown color is Rannoch's Hide, and the very brightest color is Ice Yellow. And I'm using those two also, and I'm using Rannoch's Hide just because it's what was already on the wet palette. Actually, the same goes for Ice Yellow. So I'm just, because I wanted the two blues, and I'm going to mix like a mid-tone between those two, and later on I'm doing a darker mix where I mix in some of the Rannoch's Hide, and I'm going to do a brighter mix also where I'm mixing in a bit of the Ice Yellow into the Glacier Blue. You could have picked basically almost any color, as long as it's very dark to mix in, and as long as it's very bright to mix it in. You will get a bit of a different tone than I'm getting anyways, especially if you're picking your own colors. But as I said, it's not a big deal. It's just having a progression from dark blue to very light blue. So I'm actually, in this video, I'm painting with an Artist Opus size 2 brush. And I'm painting with a bit of a bigger brush because I'm really, at this stage, just blocking in where I want something, where I want light to fall, just to kind of have an idea of what I'm doing and where I'm going with it. I don't usually do that. I'm generally painting from entirely black and then highlighting up through layers of a transition or progression in colors. But as I've already primed this in blue, I don't remember the name. It's the Citadel blue. But again, it could be basically any blue. If you want it a bit darker of a base or even brighter, it doesn't matter too much. You would just change your other colors accordingly. Like the tone I'm mixing when I'm mixing the darker one, like the oceanic blue with a bit of Rhinoxide, that color is going to be a bit darker than the base layer or the primer layer, just to push shadow. So yeah, you would of course adjust accordingly when you're mixing. As I said, I'm using the size 2 because I'm blocking in. Later on, I not in this video, but when I'm refining a bit more and like painting more of the, I'll be starting with refinement on the leg, because it's easier, because I can actually show quite nicely what I'm doing. So that's where I'm starting, but I'm going back and refining a bit more and putting more color on. And later on we'll be switching to a size 00 Artist Opus S. And I'm also starting out with no magnification, and later on when I'm refining more on my own, I'm switching to 2 times magnification, which is the norm for me. And I mean, if you don't generally paint under it, don't. I will say this mini is rather big in size, so unless you want like very nice blends and very sharp details, magnification wouldn't actually be very necessary on this. I've painted some other models where I definitely felt it was needed, and this one isn't one of those. So yeah, you can go entirely without. I've just gone into the habit of painting under magnification when I'm refining, and it can be kind of like a crutch or something you always lean on, but by now I've just kind of, it's just how I like to blend things and how to paint when I'm refining. Now I'm going in with the pure glacier blue, and I'm basically doing the same, blocking in a bit of brighter reflections to see a bit of lighting. Pretty soon I will be going in and just refining on the leg. So for the reason why it's blue entirely, and why it definitely won't be of as high quality as I can paint, this model was supposed to actually be for Patreon. It is a model that I've wanted to paint up for some time. In the end, as I'm recording this voiceover, I've both come to terms, and also I actually like it better this way, because I've picked another project for Patreon and just kept this one on YouTube instead. But this is a push fit model, which meant I've of course cleaned it, and it is a bit of a tricky one because of posing and how it's assembled. I for example would have wanted the head to be loose, and it's just that if you do that, it's quite hard to get it back in there. And I mean, by now I should have learned, but I didn't cut off those push fit like knobs. And I actually had an accident with the axe arm. The axe arm is like axe and hand, and then some of the armor goes into another part of the armor, kind of in that wrist armor joint thingy. And it has a push fit knob and hole there. So I applied glue and pushed it in, and then it didn't go all the way in, and I couldn't really get it to fit. So I actually had to take that part out, and now there's glue everywhere. Cut the knob off, put it back on, like apply more glue, put it back on, have it splash everywhere, and then the day after, when everything was dried out, I actually like cut and sanded it, and it looks perfect afterwards. You can't see it at all, but it just meant that because I just didn't cut that knob off, I had to go through more cleaning than was definitely necessary. And then kind of disaster struck. I have no idea what happened, but I've been using the same primer. I'm using Cast Black from Citadel, and I've used that since 2018, and I've never had a problem. And I keep my spray cans or rattle cans in a fairly warm closet, and as I said, it's never been a problem before. I shake it thoroughly, take it outside, and then prime. And I don't prime if it's like raining or if it's freezing outside or anything. But for some reason, when I went to prime this guy, it most of the model turned out great, but right around the face and chest and some on the backside of legs, a bit on the chest, on the belt buckle, it just looked horrible. It was blotchy and bubbly, and I don't know what happened at all. I've never even stripped something before, but this was a model where I definitely had to, because it just, it looked horrible. So I fetched some isopropyl alcohol and just dunked him in it, and then I let him sit for like half an hour, something like that. Took it out and brushed it with an old toothbrush, and the primer mostly came off, and then dunked him again, and then I think 20 minutes or something later, I then went back and did the exact same thing, which means it cleaned the primer right off. I mean, you can kind of still tell in the very deepest recesses when you've stripped the model, but there is no texture left when you've done it. But on this one, there was a lot of texture. Even it still had that like bubbly look, kind of like if you accidentally spilled glue, or if almost like when I primed the solvent or propellant or something from the rattle can itself hit the model in a ratio that it definitely shouldn't. You can kind of see on the knee, like the very top of the knee. It is a bit rough. Later on, I'm cutting that and just sanding it. I'm doing it off camera, so I'll just keep it as is for now. But it still had some texture there too. The belt buckle still had texture. The face, luckily, basically no texture. A tiny bit on the chest. Backside of the leg had a lot of texture, and yeah, I was pretty bummed out about it because I had stripped it and like everything went the way it should, but just the when I applied the primer the first time, it kind of, yeah, something happened with the plastic, and that's why it's blue now. Because then I thought, okay, I'll just reprime it, and I reprimed it in black, which didn't look not terrible, but it just wasn't amazing, and that meant I would need to basically have another color on the black all over. So I thought, okay, whatever, I'll just I had the blue primer too, so I sprayed that over, and it hit most of it, especially because now it has 2 layers of primer, and I was a bit generous with it, not like overly so, but just adding a bit more than you probably would normally for it to cover some of those imperfections, and it mostly worked out, but it does have some texture, so that's why it's entirely blue now, and I will have to like base coat the elements that shouldn't be blue. I mean, he has so much armor that it might actually be the quickest way anyways. I'm just normally not doing it that way. So yeah, this one or this project is a bit different in that sense, that I'm working from a monocolored base, and also like sketching in a bit first, just to see how I like the colors and stuff like that. I haven't painted Space Marine armor with these 2 blues before, so I wasn't entirely sure if they like looked how I wanted it to. But in the end, I actually decided that it didn't matter too much. I would just go for the look that it ended up being. He's not going into any armor or army or anything, but I just wanted him to be blue, and that's why I'm saying pick your favorite blues. It doesn't at all have to be these. So yeah, that's the reason why everything is looking a bit different. I've gotten a new can of primer, and I've primed since, and it didn't happen at all the next time. So I don't know what happened. Just something went wrong entirely. At this point in the video, you can see I mixed the darker blue to kind of panel line some areas where if I went a bit over the edge or something, I could go back in with the dark blue, and I will be using it for glazing shadows in a bit and stuff like that. And I've mixed the mid-tone of the glacier blue and the oceanic blue. You don't have to do a mid-tone mix like that. I'm just doing it because I really find that making more mixes makes the blending for me so much easier. The way I'm blending things out almost entirely is as I'm doing right now. You can see how I'm going from the dark and then dragging into where I want it to be lighter. And I'm doing like tiny stripes. The dilution here is about 50-50 water to paint. It's probably a bit less here, especially since it is getting much warmer where I live, and we have quite dry air too. So my wet palette is definitely drying out much faster now than it usually is, which means, yeah, the dilution actually like changes rather quickly within a couple of hours. If you haven't added any water to your puddles of paint, it'll be I guess more like maybe 75 25 paint to water, but I'm going for approximately 50-50. It's not set in stone by any means. I'm more going for how I like the coverage opacity to be. So yeah, as I said, when I'm blending out those layers and I'm dragging it over from the dark into the light, I'm doing it here too. Tiny stripes, and always dragging in the direction of the light. Or if I'm painting in a shadow, I will obviously be dragging in the other direction. But as I usually go from dark to light, that's the direction. That means where I'm putting the brush down will have less pigments deposited as opposed to where I'm lifting the brush. So where I'm lifting the brush, it will be have the most pigment, and it will have the most opacity in the given color. And that's how I'm building the layers. So yeah, I definitely find that doing a mix in between, as I have here, it's oceanic blue, and then a mix, and then glacier blue. If I wasn't too satisfied with the smoothness of the gradient, I would just do another mix. I might add a bit more oceanic blue, and then take and to the puddle and like split that in two. So I have one with maybe, instead of 50-50 glacier blue to oceanic blue, I have one that is 30-70 and one that is 70-30. So I make two puddles between it. For me here, it's just fine, but that way, it's kind of how I like to blend and how it works out for me. And I'm not to dictate how anybody does it, but I find that layering probably is a bit underappreciated as a high-level blending technique, because people talk much more about glazing, and I just found that I spend a lot of time glazing and not really getting anywhere, and being a bit frustrated about it, and then like mixing in too much paint anyways, and then mucking up what I've already done because I got ahead of myself. And then so I kind of just taught myself how to do blending through layering. Sometimes if I want it really smooth, I'll go back and then glaze, or like in a traditional sense, or even just like the same stripy motion that I'm doing. I can do that with more of a glaze, or maybe like a fat glaze, something like 3 parts water to 1 part paint, or something like that. So I'm basically mostly doing this, a bit of dotting and striping, and like sometimes if the area is very small, I'll just do a stipple even over the transition, and that's where I found magnification really helps, because you can see the layers then much clearer. And if you can see the layer within the magnification and you're not exactly happy with it, you can try and blend it out, and when you are happy, it'll be quite smooth without the magnification. So yeah, I'm going through here I'm starting to paint in the glacier blue, just pushing the light. The light is a top bit left light. I find doing top left is the most natural for me, and I'm not sure why, but I think it's because I read left to right too. So it's just the way I look at the model anyways. So yeah, that's the direction I've chosen, but it is very top down anyway, so reflections will be almost in the middle, just maybe slanted a bit towards the left. So yeah, I'm building up here. On the model itself, I will say the armor is incredibly detailed, and because it looks kind of almost runic. And I've seen some like renditions of this model where they've done those lines as an OSL effect, and I won't be doing that. I'll be painting the panels and not having any light in there, but you definitely could go for it. And the ones I've seen looked pretty good. But yeah, I didn't know what kind of light I wanted there, and I knew I wanted to push the contrast on the armor. But you could have definitely gone for like a much darker blue armor, and then the blue kind of OSL, kind of like the OSL in the recessed runic lines. But yeah, it just means it has a lot of edges, and you want to edge highlight all of them. Talking a bit about light on the volumes and edge highlights, it means that every upwards facing edge would be quite bright. Maybe not like all the way to your very brightest, because I'm kind of highlighting it, like the leg, for example, the shin or whatever, shin armor I'm painting right now. I'm painting it as a cylinder, which means the light will be like falling down and then running through the length of it. And that means like all the panels on the very front of the leg will be the brightest ones. And I'm not distinguishing like too much if they are higher up or lower. I am a bit. So the knee, very top of the knee, will be brighter than like the bottom, just before the foot. But even there, it will be pretty bright. And because I have the light running there, it means that all the smaller volumes, they are kind of, because everything is intersected by these lines, it means it turns everything into a smaller volume. And I will still be painting those as kind of individual volumes, in the sense that if they have an edge, I would want to highlight that edge. Saying that, upwards facing edges, very bright. Downwards facing edges, not as bright, and the ones like I'm painting here, still pretty bright, at least, especially up the top, because that's how light will travel down that edge. And I will then kind of fade it out into the length of that edge. So that also means that some of the edges are definitely not as bright. If it's an edge that is in a more shadowed area, it will be much less bright than if it's an edge in a very lit area on that same shin. Here, for example, another upwards facing edge, and I want that to be very bright. And you can see I did it on the entire length there, but on the other side, I'm not pulling the same, it's not the entire length of that edge that I'm painting in. So you could see how I painted some of it only. And that's kind of so every edge could also, or would also have kind of like a gradient on it. Because it is an edge, it's quite subtle, and it will be hard to see, you can't exactly distinguish where it should go to and from, but it is kind of important to not have just every edge be exactly the same brightness, because you kind of lose that the effect you want to produce in having the very front of the shin be the brightest. So yeah, keep in mind that not every edge of all the panels, and this goes for basically when you're painting any volume. Same goes for if you're painting something non-metallic. You don't have to, some parts in the very brightest areas, the edge would be all the way to white, for example. But there would be some areas where it wouldn't be all the way up to white because it's in a more shadowed area. So maybe you're actually only highlighting that edge with a mid-tone of some kind. And it is a bit tricky, and it takes a bit to get into it, but it's a really good habit to kind of try and look for a bit of a distinction in the edge brightness. I will say, because it's under a very bright light here, all the colors look a bit more, like white than compared to what they actually are in real life. But those edges do go pretty bright though. So as to just talk a bit about the armor itself and how I'm rendering that, the light on it. So Space Marine armor, I'm not deep into the lore at all, but I've seen it render it in all kinds of different ways, and all of them pretty cool, but you kind of need to make up your mind how you want it to look. As I see it, there are some different ways to do it. One way would be to render it as basically a colored non-metallic metal, which means your armor would be going from very dark to very bright, and mine actually is at least borderline that. And when you're then painting in that the reflections on that armor, you're also being mindful of having like shadows and secondary reflections visible. So, as an example, if it was this leg and I wanted to do it in a shiny non-metallic looking, like blue non-metallic, I would probably take this very bright middle highlight and move it a bit more to the left, so I could have kind of a shadow line going through, and then have a bounce light on the other side of that. Not as bright, but still pretty bright. So I'm going kind of very bright light, a shadow, not as bright light. That's a way to make Space Marine armor, and it looks really cool. Another one is to make it much flatter, and you're then conveying something that is more like almost like a plastic or something like that. So that means you have some shadow on it, but not a lot of shadow, and your shadows are small, your mid-tone is very big, and your highlights are not very big, almost not confined entirely to the edges, but mostly. And that's more like I guess it's ceramide or whatever, but that is another way to render the armor, and it is pretty popular too, especially if you're following more of an heavy metal style of painting. And then I'm going for something kind of in the middle. I really like contrast on these small minis. Here you can see my brush is touching up on that area where like the primer destroyed the plastic. It annoyed the hell out of me, but I fixed it later. But yeah, it just annoyed me so much. Anyways, I'm going for kind of a middle ground. So I have quite bright main reflections, no real bounce lights, so it does diffuse out, but I keep the main reflection quite bright, and quite a lot of contrast there. I'm still making it so that the transitions are pretty uniform, which just means that the size of your bright spots are can be big, but that means you have a lot of mid-tone showing, and then also in return a lot of shadow colors showing. So you can kind of look at your armor as 100%, and you would be looking at 33% of highlight color, 33 of mid-tone, and 33 of your shadow. Whereas, for example, a non-metallic approach, you would have much more, maybe like, I guess, 30% of shadow, or maybe even 40% shadow, and only 20% mid-tone, and then another 40% of highlight color if you're going for a bright non-metallic. So the ratios and the size of the midtones, so your transitions get very sharp, will make it look much shinier and something that is very reflective. Whereas you could also, like the heavy metal style has like almost all of it in mid-tone. Maybe like 80% mid-tone. Of course, your mid-tone can be cut into, like as I'm doing here, I have one shadow color and one very, like the darkest one, and one very bright highlight color. And then I basically have 3 mid-tone colors. I guess the glacier blue is a highlight color too, but at least 2 of them are mid-tone colors, right? So they can be cut into different steps, but it's more like what they represent on the model. If it's a lot of mid-tone visible. So that's how I'm rendering the armor on this guy. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.